Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special episode of Voice TV dedicated to our dear friend and comrade, journalist, and WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange. As we all know, if Julian is going to be extradited to the US, he will be facing 175 years in prison. He is being treated as a war criminal, and he is the one that is responsible for revealing war crimes and crimes against humanity. So why is he the one behind the bars? We are asking every day. Why are you so afraid of Assange? And who is afraid of Assange? Before I introduce my dear guest tonight, we have a short birthday message for him from Yanis Varoufakis.
So, President Biden, why are you afraid of Julian Assange? Boris Johnson, Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron, the great and the good, tyrants, tin-pot dictators, and democratically elected leaders seem to be scared of Julian Assange. The question is why? Well, we know why, don't we? Through WikiLeaks, Julian succeeded in terrorizing Big Brother. He took Big Brother's technologies, constructed a digital mirror out of them, a huge one, and turned it towards the face of Big Brother. So we, who are being watched by Big Brother, can watch Big Brother watching us. Nothing terrifies Big Brother more than that. The beauty of WikiLeaks is that it operates like an international, a global letterbox, where any whistleblower can post and place within it information that concerns all of us. WikiLeaks checks it out. They don't even know who it was that deposited that information. This is how they guarantee that no one can find out if they don't know themselves, and then allows us to know what Big Brother, big business, the big states are doing on our behalf, behind our backs, supposedly in order to keep us safe, while procuring the greatest insecurity and committing the worst crimes against humanity. This is why you are killing slowly, intentionally, in a premeditated criminal fashion, Julian Assange's body every day in Britain's Guantanamo, in Belmarsh. This is why we are looking at you in the eye, in the same way that WikiLeaks has allowed us to look at Big Brother's eye. And we are telling you in no uncertain terms. You stand accused of criminality and of murdering a man that made it possible for the rest of us to know your crimes. We shall not rest until those who perpetrate the crimes and those who cover up for them, like President Biden, President Macron, Mrs. Angela Merkel, Mr. Boris Johnson, the rest of those of you in supposed authority, are held into account. Meanwhile, with a smile on our face, we wish Julian Assange a very happy birthday. Carpe diem.
Okay, I think we have some little technical issues. Okay, I hope you all saw the video because I didn't see it for some reason. So today I have two very special guests, Angela Richter, theater director and author, and Davide Dormino, sculptor. Both of them have been fighting through their work for the freedom of whistleblowers and are very much dedicated to fighting for Julian's freedom. Angela and Davide, it's a great pleasure to have you with us tonight.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hello,
Yeah, Maya.
I'm not sure what is happening.
Everything is fine.
Hear you.
I don't hear anything.
Do you hear me now? Obviously not, because Davide, do you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you too. So obviously Maya is the only one not hearing now.
Okay, we can talk between me and you.
So, well, we obviously lost our moderator, so I hope we are not totally lost. Yeah, we will just wait till they resolve the technical problem, and yeah, let's just start to talk about our topic. Davide, I will just ask you some questions that I want to know. So maybe we start with that. It's about your work. How did you come across the idea to make this, in the meantime, very famous sculpture of the three whistleblowers? And when was it, and what inspired you?
Yeah, it inspired me, the story of WikiLeaks. As you know, the role of an artist is to keep the information and around us. So what I try to do is to visualize something that is connected with our life. And the story of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, and in this case Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden, it's a very hard story, especially for the government who try to hide some of their crimes. What I try to do is to create sculptures, an itinerant monument, different from the other monument that we can see in the main square of the most important city, that usually stay on the pedestal and nobody can touch it, but just see from down. And I create an itinerant artwork in bronze, life-size bronze of Assange, Manning, and Snowden, standing on 3 chairs with an empty 4 chairs next to them. And the empty chairs invite the people to take place next to them and to speak out the truth. But also it's a free pedestal where you can stand and you can stand and you can say something different if you want from what they did. And since 7 years, the statue has traveled from in 15 European cities. At the moment, it's the statue is in Geneva. We inaugurated the artwork the 5th of June, where the Club de la Presse Suisse launched an appeal for the liberation of Julian Assange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting. I was there when it was in Berlin. I think it was in Berlin a few times, as far as I know. I was there when it was at the Brandenburger Tor. And I was very surprised that there were really lots of people using the opportunity to stand on the 4th chair and be on the same level, you know, like the whistleblowers. And I must admit I didn't, because I was too shy to push myself in the front, you know, so I was rather observing it. But many people did, including Nils Melzer, and I'm sure you met him too. He did that, and I think he even was holding a little speech while he was standing on the chair, which was very interesting. And I think that what he did for Julian was really a lot. I mean, many people supported him over the years in a similar manner, but I think it like always, it took a man from a position, you know, a white male man, maybe a cliche, to finally be heard in a way, I think. And this is a good thing in this case, of course, you know.
Well, I think that when Nils Melzer said what he said, he changed a little bit the public opinion of Julian Assange, that in that moment was very low. So he revealed a lot of things of the background of Julian, and I think since that moment changed a lot of things.
Yes, I think it came out in the public, and
exactly.
What I find very interesting, also what I came to realize even more than before. Of course, I was a fit, but you know, we take human rights for granted, you know, exactly. And the West, especially Europe, is very proud of their human rights, and everyone can be free and so on. But what I realized, that they don't play a role in my life because I don't need them, and that applies to most of the people. In Julian Assange's case, who exposed the powerful, who spoke truth to power, exposed war crimes, and who's the only one, he was, like you said, he was putting like Yanis said, he was putting a mirror there. It's even a big light he shed on war crimes. But what actually happened is that they reversed the light onto him, you know, and all of a sudden he was in the center of it. And I was observing it for more than 10 years, what happened with his reputation, how they managed to destroy his reputation and so on. He himself called it character assassination. So the first play I did, it was 2012, I did about it. It was called Assassinate Assange. And at that point, I was not even aware how far the assassination will be. And like I said, this is something which I only became aware, that the human rights are only worth if they can be used in cases like Julian's, who spoke truth to power. When it is challenged, someone who challenges the most powerful people in the world and the most powerful military in the world and secret service and so on, then we need those human rights, and they just didn't happen, in his case. And this is for me the most shocking part, that not besides from press freedom, which we can talk about too, of course, human rights don't seem to exist in the moment when you really need them in Europe. And this is something which I found, utterly, deeply disturbing.
Yeah, and another example is Amnesty International, who started to launch the petition very, very, very late. I think maybe 1 year ago, something like that. Yeah, you're right, Angela, you're right. So tell me something about you and about what you created.
Yeah, well, I actually started doing one play. Like I said, it was 2012. I think I met Julian for the first time, I think it was 2011. Now Maya is coming back.
I'm very sorry. I have no idea what happened. I think that my computer got really hot, because even though the air conditioning is working, it's like 40 degrees here. So that's the only explanation.
Are you sure? Maybe there are some enemies that are trying to...
I'm trying not to be paranoid because of the topic, but yeah.
You are not paranoid enough.
I'm not paranoid enough, yes. So, but thank you for starting the talk without the host. That's really nice of you. But if you have a topic that you opened before I came, you can continue.
Well, we just first spoke about a little bit about Davide's sculpture, and then we talked about the non-existence of human rights in the case of Julian. And now I just started telling how I began to work with WikiLeaks and with Julian. I would just say a few words. I mean, many people already know it, but maybe some don't. I started with Assassinate Assange in 2012. I met Julian like 1.5 years earlier, so he was still free and walking around in Britain, in London at that time when I met him the first 2 times, but he was already under house arrest, so he was already not really a free person. He was wearing a tag on his foot and so on, and had this time that he had to be at home, and so he was not really free at that point, but compared to the years to come, it was, of course, different. And a year later, when he entered the embassy, I actually started to interview him for the play. And I was at that point thinking, okay, it will take 1-2 years, and then the case will be resolved, and the play was called Assassinate Assange. And like I said to Davide, I never knew at the point how much this title will be prophetic for the next decade. It's actually sad to state that, but that's what happened. And somehow I'm even glad that I didn't know, because when he entered the Ecuadorian embassy and I really got to know him, we were so full of hope. Everything looked like, okay, that justice and truth will prevail after a short period of time. But no, it just wouldn't. It got worse and worse and worse. And this is something that that was really difficult to watch over the last decade. What the system did to Julian, not only that he's now in a prison in isolation and stuff, but even before that, the time in the embassy, it was so difficult. I think people can relate to it now a bit more, that they experienced 1 year of lockdown. And this lockdown that we experience is nothing to sit in a room and not be able to even go out on a balcony or something, So it's unbelievable what he went through in 7 years. So already, and then after that, it even had a sad climax, going to a supermax prison, the British Guantanamo, like Yanis pointed, which is really not very. It's not exaggerated to say that. And it's something that made me realize lots about the world that we live in. And so I continued to work. Like I said, I was thinking, okay, I will do one play, and I ended up, I think all in all, I did 4 plays where he was either the main topic or one of the topics,
Yeah, it's interesting what you just said about that. Was I also visited Julian. It was 2016 when I visited him. It was right after the event First Day Came for Assange that we did in a couple of cities, and I remember that when I came there, and of course we know all 3 of us have been there, that it was really small. And I thought, okay, it's an embassy, and Renata told me that it would be small, but I really didn't imagine that it would be like smaller than my place, I imagined an embassy, it's supposed to be like something huge where he can walk in some kind of a garden or something in my imagination. And then I remember, this room with these curtains where he cannot, reveal the curtains because he can be attacked from outside. It's like on the street. It's in the first floor, not even the first, but the ground floor. And then I didn't know what to say to him. It was really a weird situation, because if I would start talking to him what is happening outside and what we were doing, I felt like, no, we can't talk about that. He's here. And then about my, trip to North Korea, no, I know he wants to hear about that, but he can't travel. And it was really weird. And now you're comparing it to COVID. Of course, that it's much worse for him than it was for us during COVID. But I remember that when the lockdowns started, and we in Serbia had really severe lockdowns. We were locked for 4 days that we could not leave the house at all, during the weekends, and from 5 p.m. every day to tomorrow. And I remember that for me, the first time it happened, all my friends were like, oh, going crazy. And I was like, no, this is okay. I thought of him, and I was like, this is for him. This is every day for him for 7 years. And now for 2 more years, even worse. And I was like, no, I'm completely okay with this, because I'm going to go on the street in a couple of hours, and I have to be okay with this. And I just can't imagine what kind of torture in a system that we call democratic, is happening to him for all these years. And I think that it's really a great thing that both of you are doing these artworks that are making people a little bit aware, of the situation he's going through, and also the message that he gave to us. Because like your play, the other one, The Super Nerds, which we will see a little excerpt from. We can even see it now in a couple of minutes. But I just wanted to ask you what kind of not problems, but did you have some kind of problems? I'll just give a short introduction. The Super Nerds are a multimedia interactive play that you did, and it was in Schauspiel Köln, right, in 2015. But it was also broadcasted on television, radio, and online. And it was very interesting that you were actually spying in a way. You did a little bit of surveillance spying on the audience. And I think it was a really great thing, because people realized that this abstract thing of like being surveilled, because I know a lot of people that are like, I don't care who is looking at my phone and stuff, became very concrete. Like we can do this, really. Like not we, like Angela Richter, a theater director, can do this. Can you imagine what the US government can do? If I just a small little theater artist can do to you, you're not even using, I don't know how big hacking systems, then. But I think it's a really great thing that you gave this experience to the audience. But I was interested how the audience reacted to this spying, and did people realize it, and did you have these discussions with people, and also did you have problems with dealing with all these topics of Julian? Because as we know, all of us here are very much in favor of Julian and his message to the world, but there are people even in lots of places that think that he's a traitor, that think that he is somebody who actually is a spy, a Russian spy, whatever they think of him. Did you have problems like with people during all this work you did concerning him?
Yes, very much so, especially in the beginning, when I did assassinate Assange. There were two different phases, actually, because I did it for so many years, I was actually visiting him every few months, sometimes weeks. It depended, how much time I had and so on. But, we developed a friendship over the years. So I continued to work. And it was very hard for me to experience him as a person who I really started to like and to know, and also to see what he did to humanity, what service he did, and what was coming back, So there was the first smear was, of course, the problem with Sweden. So I was very much attacked by feminists, and leftists. I consider myself a feminist, so, but it was very interesting because people didn't even see the play, because in the first play I included the police protocols of the two women. Yeah. In itself are so revealing, and I was furious that none of the newspapers of the world was even looking into the fucking protocols, because even just to read them, even if they were manipulated by the police and so on, as we know today, but even in this manipulated form, they were actually revealing a lot of his innocence, in my opinion. So I put those in the big parts of it I put in the play, and the rest, the original paper, I gave to the audience, as a program, so that they can see the facts, that we had so far, So, but nonetheless, they didn't want to even listen. They didn't want to read. Before the play was shown in Vienna, we are speaking about Vienna, who has a very strong leftist and feminist community. They were asking for the play to be forbidden in an open letter to me. And even the director at that time was putting pressure on me to take out the Swedish case. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. And if you want to forbid the play, you have to do it. You have to go openly and censor my play. But I'm not going to censor myself, So, and overnight, somebody sprayed on the theater, which is a typical Viennese old building, very beautiful, and they sprayed "No stage for rapists." So people were hysteric, It was really interesting. Nobody wanted to even listen, Maybe psychologically, sometimes I think they were just glad that they don't have to look at the war crimes and all the ugly things that he exposed. They were occupied judging his character. I don't know. Maybe some psychologists have to cope with that, and also what the press did. Today, or I think it was 2 days ago on his birthday, Frankfurter Rundschau, a German newspaper, they put a huge letter on the front page. In a way, I would say they are even apologizing to him in a way, like finally acknowledging what he did and reassuring him of their solidarity. And I was thinking, my God, you are really too late. You should have done that fucking 10 years ago, or at least 6-7 years ago. So anyway, I will continue. So I did that, and then I did the play with Surveillance. And at that time, it became again very difficult, because then after that, he got involved in this US election, And that was when the Swedish case a little bit came in the background, and then Trump came. And again, we had a problem, because the press and then also the audience would pick up everything, thankfully, that can be used against him. So he was all of a sudden, I remember when he put out the emails of Hillary, which exposed her, and they were correct. It was no lies in it. And even a US judge was ruling at some point that this was something that the public needs to know, of public relevance. And still people blamed him only for Trump to be elected. But I know when it happened that everybody was saying in the press, it's not even interesting, nothing is revealed, just go on, don't watch it. And then when Trump became president, everybody said, oh, it's him, So I don't know, I have the feeling that Julian Assange was the scapegoat for everything that went wrong,
Yeah.
And he's trying to somehow thematize it in my place. And like you said, your first question about the reactions, yes, I did some surveillance on the audience, and I was even able to do things that were kind of good. I really, also, I had the best advice. I went to Moscow to meet Edward Snowden for the first time, and he also told me some things. So I did have some good, background knowledge how to do it,
You were not just a little theater director. You were a little hacker theater director.
I mean, I'm not a hacker myself, but I hired some people who can do it, and they really did a great job. And we even started it weeks before. So when people would purchase a ticket online, they were already in the game. They were receiving letters from Jacob Appelbaum and people involved, even getting calls. And I mean, we involved them like in a movie, And the funny thing is, after a while, people start to forget it's only a game. So at some point we said, oh my God, something went wrong with the technique and we are so sorry, but now you are on a no-fly list. And people would really believe it. There were some journalists from the local newspapers who freaked out. They called the theater and said, like, what are you doing? We want to go to America next week on holiday. Now we are on the no-fly list. It was very interesting that how easy it is actually to make people forget everything and then believe everything. So for me, it was very interesting. And most of the audience were really shocked, especially, by the way, older people. I would say 40 plus and even more. They were totally unaware of these things, and some of them even watched the play twice, and they approached me and said, I couldn't sleep for a week, after your play. So I think it did make this very abstract feeling. I mean, today we have this problem. It's a little bit like climate change, but climate change, you can even see some pictures of floods, of burning now, even, the heat, everything. It's abstract, but you have at least some pictures in your head. With surveillance, it's really invisible, and we don't feel it, and we don't feel like someone who is unfree.
Yeah, completely.
I think the play managed to show a little bit of that.
And Davide, your sculpture, I don't know if you talked about it and how much you talked about it, but it's a really magnificent sculpture for people that don't know, but most of the people know about it. Anything to say? It was for the first time, it is a traveling sculpture, so it's going from place to place, and it features, it's a bronze sculpture of Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, and Chelsea Manning that are standing on chairs. We will also see a short excerpt of it later. And there is a fourth chair. The fourth chair is the chair for the audience, the people that see the sculpture, that can do something with it. And it also won a very Prix Éthique prize in 2016 by Anticor, and it traveled, I think, more than 15 cities, right? Yeah, I think you're muted.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
you're right.
No problem. Right. Yeah, no problem. And for me, it was really interesting, this fourth chair. And first, the artists like standing on the people standing on chairs. What did they do? Did they just stand and like take photos? Because for me, it was really a great position of sitting on chairs is something very comfortable. Like when you think of sitting, it's a very passive position where I don't know, we're from the theater, Angela and me, and we know that sitting on a chair is like a passive role of the audience, just looking and taking something to like from the scene, not being able to participate. But standing on it, it's a rude gesture. It's like a chair is not for standing. If you would stand on a chair in a restaurant or wherever, somebody would tell you, go down, don't make the chair dirty and stuff like that. And you wanted them to stand on chairs, chairs, not on something, but on chairs. So it is a rude, uncomfortable gesture where you're not sitting, you're not comfortable, you're standing, you're doing something that's against the law. And you gave the fourth chair to people to also be rude in a way. Was this your idea when you were doing the sculpture? And also, how did people react to this this position? And also the same question as Angela, did you have problems doing this? Did you have problems putting the sculpture on some certain places? And did you sometimes think of showing the sculpture in London? Would it be possible in any case?
First, I would like to tell you that the statement behind this artwork, that is stand up instead of sitting like the others. So it's exactly that. We have to stand up because it's necessary act in some direction. And if we do an act, we can try to change something of our life. But first, I would like to say something about the imaginary and imagination, because everything to me is starting from there. Drawing is the first thing we start doing as children, and we draw because we imagine new worlds. Drawing also teach us to look at the world and read ourselves. So drawing help us to develop then our critical sense. But unfortunately, drawing is the first thing we abandon as we grow up, and with that we abandon our imagination, because we start to dealing with reality, and as we know, life is difficult for everyone. But the imaginary remains in some person, in the artist in general, philosopher, and few political leaders. So this is the reason why I think that art is political. As it's political in the moment in which it acts as human needs. Someone wrote, I think maybe Picasso, if I remember well, that the artist is a survived child. And I love very much this because art and culture to me are the real weapons of critical mass construction to make us evolve. I consider Julian Assange an intellectual. I have the fortune also, as you, to meet him. He's imagined a world made of transparency, while knowing that those in power often lie, and sometimes secrets are lies. Julian is a sentinel of democracy, but sometimes politics is not made by honesty, but by strict, and we can't delegate our salvation. So we have to act now to defend Julian, and I also think that ripping out Assange's tongue doesn't not make him as a liar, but it's a message to the world that is afraid of what he might say. So this is one of the reasons why I create this artwork. I think that our imagination is everything, and we can't stay still for that, because what's happened to Julian could happen to us for sure if we will be extradited. So as an artist, I have the duty to defend freedom of speech and expression and information, because if we receive the right information, not only for the mainstream but from the free press, we have the access to that information, and we can change in which part of the world we want to stay. So the artwork is exactly that. To reply to your answer, the only place where we had problems to bring the statue is London.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's why I asked, is there a chance that you could do a guerrilla action and maybe do it sometimes in London?
Unfortunately, the pandemic didn't support us to this, because we tried some months ago to move the statue also with them and their campaign, and we tried to, and we find a place for the event, but with this restriction, it was very, very difficult. For the rest, I didn't receive problems for the statue. I didn't receive support from the art world. It's strange, but it's like that. But I created this artwork for the people, not only for the world of art.
Yes, and you also, which is great, you did a crowdfunding for the statue. It was that also a thing. Did you ask for financing somewhere and didn't get it, or did you decide it to be a crowdfunded project because you wanted people to participate in creating the statue? The second. That's what I thought. That's what I thought, but I wanted
just to also, because when you create something, you can't imagine all the reaction of the people, but it was something like to feel if the feeling was good to the world, because half of the world thinks that that he is a traitor, but I concentrate myself to the other half of the world that thinks that he's a hero.
Yes, and maybe with your work you could, in a way, and I think there are more and more people, which you were talking also about, that are realizing now that things are not black and white as they maybe thought a couple of years ago. They really see a person suffering in prison for a cause that was something for the whole of humanity. I would love for us to see a little excerpt of Angela's play, Super Nerds. Maybe, Angela, I saw your play, unfortunately, only on video, but it was enough because it was a really good, you sent me a link, so it was good. And we're going to show a part with Julian that is like he's a hologram. Can you tell us something about this? Did he really? How does this function? I'm completely technologically not aware how this hologram thing functions. So maybe give us a short introduction, and then we can see the excerpt.
Yes, it was very. I will not reveal all the secrets about it, but it was very difficult to achieve this. I think a normal theater, even a state theater, which it was, couldn't afford at that point this technique. Maybe it's even a bit cheaper today. I don't know. I think it might be still very expensive to do it. So you need a special camera to film Julian. That is the one thing. And then you need a huge device because we wanted him to have the same size as the actors, to appear on stage and be seen by the actual audience, not only on TV. To do that on TV is rather simple in a way, but to do it live for audience of 600 people, and we had the 20-meter wide stage, which is 20 meters, I think so, very wide. So and from every angle, people had to see Julian and receive him in a 3D impression, like everyone, and that he could just talk with the actors and behave like he's standing with them on stage. So we managed that, but it was really expensive and it was a big effort to do it. We were very lucky that we had the German national TV in and also some producers, the Gebrüder Beetz from Berlin, and that made it possible to finance the whole thing. Otherwise, we couldn't have done it. So yeah.
And he was not live. It was pre-recorded and then made.
Well, I will not tell that because we never revealed.
Okay. So then we okay. So let's see this excerpt and then we can talk afterwards.
Good evening.
Julian.
Guten Abend, Julian Assange. Wie geht es Ihnen? How are you?
Well, I would be very pleased to be.
Ich wäre gern hier in Deutschland.
Well, I would be very pleased to be here in Germany.
Well, I can understand. How do you feel after 3 years of being detained without official charge?
To be detained 4.5 years without.
Wenn man 4,5 Jahre
To be detained for 4.5 years without charge in Europe, well, something is wrong with Europe.
United Kingdom should be booted
England
out.
sollte aus
Many
Europa
things are wrong with
rausfahren.
Europe, such as the United Kingdom being in Europe. The United Kingdom should be pushed out of Europe if it can't obey basic principles of European law.
What do you think? Which influence does this situation have on your life?
Well, it's difficult.
Es ist schwierig.
Well, it's difficult. It's very difficult for my family and my young children to be in a situation they need to be protected,
Man muss sie beschützen.
as various death threats have been made against them and so on. So I'm angry about the situation.
Aber
But on the other hand, WikiLeaks is still going.
Yeah, I must admit that I'm a little bit shocked every time I see the English version because they translated it to German and then back to English.
Yeah, it's
I don't know why they did that, but yeah, in the show we could hear the original, of course.
yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Okay, I won't ask you for other details. But watching this, I was also thinking about the art world that we work in and about WikiLeaks and the way that WikiLeaks functions as a horizontal organization, international, where people, it's non-profit and people gather from all over the world and do a good cause for humanity, working with the leaks and, giving anonymous sources the protection that they need to leak all the things. And I was also thinking, can we in a way be and should we as artists be whistleblowers in our own in our own jobs? Should we also have this is it our duty in a way to be whistleblowers? I was talking last time I had this DM voice. I was talking to Hito Steyrl, and she was telling me that a couple of times she had to be a detective to see where the money that was financing her art is from. And then she realized at one point, I think it was in Istanbul, that she was financed, even somewhere in Europe, that she was financed by a company that makes weapons. And of course, she had to react to this. And we in the art world, and Davide also in visual arts, and we in theater are many times have this situation where we are thinking where the money is coming from, and should we work for some institutions? But then we have to work for them because we cannot always work somewhere outside of institutions. And then are there some kind of information from these institutions that should be leaked, like, I'm sorry, but I want transparency. I want to see how this theater is financed, where the money is going. Why is it going here, not there? Should we, in a way, be also not just artists, but also whistleblowers in our own work?
You know what, Maya? It's a very interesting point that you are bringing here, and I must say, as a first statement, that I am working in theater for 20 years, and I also had a lot to do with art world, because I was married to a very famous German artist for 20 years. I'm utterly and totally disappointed and disillusioned with the theater and the art world. Artists like Davide is very rare. I mean, imagine how many artists are there and nobody even bothered about Julian. In the opposite, my experience with artists and theater people, they were very difficult. They considered me being a freak. And by the way, I did that. I was a whistleblower 3 years ago because I exposed in my own theater in Cologne some power abuse. And imagine I was also the one who was punished in the end, in a way, like always, and not the people who are the actual, although there were 20 people suffering from it as victims, still they are in the same position. So, it happens always. For me, it was not a big drama because, compared to things that happened to Julian or Edward Snowden or Chelsea Manning, it's nothing, So, but I would also like to answer your question about art. I prepared a little text that I want to read to the audience because I think they might be interested in Julian's opinion on art. And that was one of my very first questions I posed to him. I think it might have been 2012 that I asked him that, because I have lots of material still that I recorded and transcribed that I never used, in the place. So I once asked him if he thinks, and that was really an important question for me because I wanted to know what he thinks, if I can change something, it was very naive of me in a way, doing this play about him. So I asked him if he thinks that art is a powerful tool. And this is what he said to me. Okay, I will read it out. I found this text today. Okay, he said to me, I come from a theater family. The word art has the same root as the Latin word artifice, which also means lie or deception. All art is a form of deception, a lie. Sometimes it is necessary to deceive in small ways in order to reveal more effectively the truth as a whole. But this is seldom done in art. Here's how I see it. Good art leaves the viewer more powerful than he was before the art experience. He leaves the theater, the audience leaves the theater more powerful than he entered it. Stronger, more resilient, smarter, more intelligent. I think that's the only kind of good art. Everything else only serves to intoxicate and exploit the viewer. And if you ask me, does art have power? It certainly does. Look at the Iraq War, which was created by the art of lies, by the art of secrecy, through pro-war movies that came out of Hollywood. Art affects the lives of millions of people. So art has power, and it is mostly negative. The question is, does it also have the power to do good? Well, it does. It certainly does. But remember, the basic tool is the tool of deception. So I find that I was just reading it because I was looking into it for this talk today that he turns 50. And I was really shocked in a way today. I even look at this quote much differently when I did back then. Actually, back then I didn't even want to hear it because I wanted just him to say, yeah, do the play. And,
Yeah.
I was kind of, shocked when he said it, but I think he is true. It might be not something that people want to hear, but I think he has a point,
Yes, I completely agree with him now. And after COVID and after not being in the theater for a year, I really think that the power of art is big, but much less than we think, And I think that doing things that are above art, that are not just art, are also very important. Not to give yourself completely into something and not realizing that you're living in a world where you have to act and react in a non-artistic way, in a way.
Yes.
And yeah, Davide, can you also tell me what is your opinion on this topic? And do you think that, I know that you work not just in institutions, but also in different kinds of ways of working, but what is your opinion on this?
Yeah, I'm an independent artist, so I don't have to say thank to anybody, and I don't have to need nothing to anybody. So that's that make me free. But it's very hard to work alone because you have to find the money when you have to produce something. But the point is always the same. It makes sense what I'm doing to the people. So my topic was always the humans. And I try to create an imaginary regarding exactly the human beings. So for sure, if you do this work, you need connection. Sometimes call it public relation. To me, are human contacts. So what I'm did is always try to explain my project and find some people who can support me and support my idea if it makes sense. In Italy, it's a different situation from Germany or other places because the role of the artist is not considered. So if you have, I don't know in English, something like a bureaucracy systems. No, I don't know. If you pay the tax as an artist, you can receive some money, especially during the pandemic. But if you don't pay the tax, you don't have to. You can't receive that money. That maybe is good. Maybe Angela can confirm to me this, that Angela Merkel gave 5,000 euro to every artist at the beginning of the pandemic. Is it correct? The information that I have?
It was even more in some cases. It went up till 9,000, I think. It was very easy to do it, actually. Yeah, in the beginning, people get some money, and it was also different in the different areas of Germany. I know that in North Rhine-Westphalia, they even had another program in 2021. I know in Berlin in 2020, people could get on a very easy way just to signing up on the internet, and 3 days later you had like the money, between 5,000 and 9,000. So yeah, I think that Germany, in fact, did offer some help that was certainly more than in other countries, as far as I know, you know. I think it became more difficult in this year, you know, to get money again. I didn't try, and so I don't know exactly what happened this year, but I heard from other people who really needed the money that it was quite difficult. And at some point they asked artists to go on the level of, you know, to get the social money that normally people get who are unemployed, which would be fine, but it became very, very difficult for artists to get it because you had to go through all a process of revealing a lot of private stuff, which is weird because it's not your fault, you know, why would you do that? And then, yeah, it was also nearly impossible to meet all the things that requirements to get it. So I think it became very difficult in the meantime. In the beginning, they pulled out a lot. So yeah.
So that yes, in Italy it's very, as I told you, it's very difficult because the visual artists, especially the visual artists, are not considered. When you say artists in Italy, we think only about the actors, musicians, and that's it. Contemporary visual artists are not considered. But it's okay. We are trying to move in something also. But it's strange because Italy is the country of art, no? If we can say that. But we can't live with our works. So that's really make me sad and mad. Anyway, I think that art is the last territory for reflection, for individual expression. And as I said before, it's the only way we had to defend ourselves and to develop our critical senses. So we can't, if we try to image for a minute a word without art and without the artist, we are keeping out the soul of the word. Because contemporary art, how can I say, is an opportunity to understand better the world around us. Some phenomenon without art will be hidden. No? So our role is very important in the society. It's not important the direction that you want to choose, for sure. We decide to be artivist, no? Me and Angela. Yeah, to create awareness and to tell to the people a different story. How is it presented? That's what I think.
And I would love us to see your video of your piece, Anything to Say, which is beautiful because you put the sculptures in nature, which is something that is completely different than we are used to, you know, to see sculptures in some really great, huge, free, natural environments. So, yes.
Yeah.
Does the truth belong to the one who speaks first? Or is the truth sometimes hidden behind facades, word constructions, walls? Why do we punish the people that try to remain truthful? And why is it easier to lie to the reflections in our mirrors rather than to confront reality? Does the loss of our freedom not matter to us at all? Or are we too occupied by the thought that certain things do not concern us? How much freedom are you willing to sacrifice to give truth your face?
How much freedom are we willing to sacrifice? So how much freedom are you willing to sacrifice while you're working? Are you thinking of this, you know, when you work? We, of course, sacrifice some kind of a freedom in some situations, but it is really, I think, important to think what are your boundaries? I'm going to this, but if I come to this, maybe I don't know, I get arrested. If I do this, maybe I won't work in this place. So what is a free artist in your opinion? I know that nobody can really be free, but if we would imagine a free artist and a real independent artist that is in a way also sacrificing his freedom, who would this be? What would he do?
Angela.
Angela.
Well, that's a difficult question. You know, like I said, I have a very unromantic view of the art world that it exists today, and even in my first play, I put out a thesis, even accusing myself being an artist and not someone who is, let's say, a hacker or someone who's trying to be a truth teller. So for me, the true artists of today are actually people who are whistleblowers, you know, because what they did changed society so much more, like art used to do. And I think it has something to do with history and how we, you know, art was very important to somehow establish some quality of life that we have today, you know, that we can love who we want to love, that there is a certain kind of individual freedom that we do have. And I think this is also a problem why people don't feel any problems anymore with surveillance and these things. As long as they don't feel it, and as long as their personal freedom is not so much affected, they don't care. And most art pieces became about narcissism, you know, very self-involved or like Julian said, intoxicating things, and to create problems that don't even exist. Why would I bother people with problems that don't exist? So to say the truth, I'm an artist who is very disappointed in artists today and in the art world, maybe even in art, but maybe it's also okay, because now maybe other people have the same struggles that we artists had in the last centuries, because I feel that art somehow stopped being the avant-garde in the last, let's say, 10 years or so, in a way, because we stopped asking for the maximum demand, in society and politically wise. I know even that in Germany it became very unpopular to make political art, or things that are important looking at society. It was more like looking at personal problems and this and that, and being somehow drugged by art. And for me, I don't care about this anymore. So for me, someone like Julian Assange is who is placing the maximum demand, is something like the avant-garde today. That's all I can say.
Yeah, you're right, Angela. Before to be an artist, I'm a citizen. I'm also a father and a husband. But to be an artist is a vocation, a mission. I'm free. I think that I'm free to decide what I want to do. But to do that, if you want to be an artist, you have to know that 90% of the work is organization. Only the 10% is make the hands on the materials. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in this case, when I create Everything to Say, when I started thinking about it, it was the end of 2013. So I don't know how many years, or 8 maybe. I spent every single day of my life with Julian. So I consider him part of my family. My wife told me many times a day, always me, you, and Julian. Okay, that's very funny. But it's true, because since I create this artwork, I worked every day with these sculptures, because I have meeting like this, interview, events, and many other things. So I have to work on the social network. I have to share the message, and I'm sure that in Italy, especially, I involved a lot of people that did nothing about Julian Assange and his story. So that makes me proud, frankly. Yeah, it's a sacrifice, but as I told you, it's very natural to me.
So Julian turned 50 years 2 days ago, and I really wanted to finish the discussion with a birthday message that the two of you would give to him. If you could tell him something now to make his life a little bit easier at this moment. Of course, it's very hard. What would you say to Julian? What would your message be to him?
Angela. No, okay. If you want, I can go. I can go first.
Unmute.
Okay.
Angela.
I said before. Something very simple. That it's something that we wish to him, to be free as soon as possible, to re-embrace his family, his child, and his fiancée, and to be free to breathe the fresh air that missing in his body since 10 years.
You also had a little, you told me before our talk that you have a little speech that you wanted to give? Or are you still?
Who, me?
You, yes. You said I have some little speech. Maybe I didn't understand you.
No, it's okay. I said it before. So that's my wishes.
Okay. Angela?
Okay. I would. It became for me very difficult. I will write tonight to Julian in an email to the prison, and I will exactly say this, that I wish him the freedom, and that he will, the second century of his life, that he will be freed, that truth will finally set him free. I still have that hope, although it is really difficult sometimes to keep it up. And I will send him a little quote that I found today. I read it in an article of Hannah Arendt, the philosopher that she wrote in the 1950. And it's related actually to the Germany post-Nazi Germany, some observation that she did about the problem of opinion versus facts. And she is relating it, of course, to her observations in post-Nazi Germany. But when I read this article, I realized that it very much fits in today's situation that we are experiencing at the moment, with all this post-factic, alternative facts, and people who cannot distinguish between facts and news. And I know that Julian was someone who was always insisting to call it scientific journalism, what he does, what WikiLeaks does, and also to empower people to make up their own opinion based on facts that they have access to. And this is, for me, something which is still very unique that he created. And tonight I will send him the whole article, and I will only, by Hannah Arendt, maybe he knows him already, I don't know, maybe he might, maybe not, but I will just read out a little part. And as I said, it is related to Germany, but I think that mostly in principle today, we can find that phenomenon actually, unfortunately, everywhere, especially on social media, maybe even. Okay, so Hannah Arendt said then, but perhaps the most striking and frightening aspect of the German flight from reality is the habit of treating facts as though they were mere opinions. In all fields, there is a kind of gentleman's agreement by which everyone has a right to ignorance, under the pretext that everyone has a right to his opinion. And behind this is the tacit assumption that opinions really do not matter. This is a very serious thing, not only because it often makes discussion so hopeless, but primarily because the average German honestly believes that this free-for-all, this nihilistic relativity about facts, to be the essence of democracy. Yeah, so when I was reading this sentence especially, I thought, okay, this is so true today, and this is something that I will send to Julian, because I think he was someone who was exactly doing a great job going against this phenomenon that we have today, that people can really not distinguish anymore between fact and opinion and fake news.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Angela and Davide, for being our guests.
Sorry,
tonight.
I'm sorry, Maya. Can I say a little thing?
Of course. I
wanna launch a global call. So please save the date, September 11, 2021, Austria, on the Costanza Lake in the city of Bregenz. Is correct, Angela? Bregenz? I think so. There will take place a huge concert called Take a Stand, Stars for Assange. So I would like to invite all the musicians from every country to participate to this huge festival. We are waiting for the answer of Mr. Roger Waters, that I'm sure that will accept the invitation. We will other most important artists. So please share this information to your contact and to all the people that are listening to us. Thank you.
Of course. We will share. I will share in Serbia also to some of my musician friends. So thank you so much, really, for being with us at DM Voice tonight. And I also, before closing, would like to tell the audience that we are launching a fundraiser for DM Voice because we need your support to continue the work of DM Voice that has been developing, turning the DiEM25 political messages into art. So if you can help us, it would be really great. And now I would like to close this episode with a short video of artworks from DM Voice that are dedicated to Julian Assange. And also with my message, dear Julian, happy birthday, and we will continue to spread your idea and fight for your freedom as long as it takes.
Just a little one thing. People were asking about the article I quoted. It's The Aftermath of Nazi Rule Report from Germany by Hannah Arendt. You can Google that. That's one thing. And the last thing I want to add before we finish is Free Assange.
Free Assange.
Free Assange.
Free Assange. Free Assange.
Mankind, in some sense, just having a small glimmer of understanding about how it is progressing through the world. We actually have access to much more knowledge, but it's been eliminated through the speed of information processing. Processing of knowledge is moving into artificial intelligence. In a computerized civilization, encryption is the fundamental building block of liberty. Some small amount of capital leading to mass open-cut harvesting of the knowledge of humankind. A serious threat to the stability of human civilizations. Smells a bit like totalitarianism.